Welcome to the first part of the quiz review. The quiz is a format of multiple choice questions and open response. Therefore, we're going to spend all of today focusing on the content that you will be quizzed on in the multiple choice section. I want you to write notes on each one of these slides and make a mental note to yourself. Do any of these things confuse you? Is there anything you need to go to office hours for? All right. So one thing we need to know in order to be successful on the quiz is how bacteria make us sick. Bacteria make us sick in ways that are due to its sneaky nature, where it can actually hide within our body and be protected from the environment. So bacteria can either be gram-negative or gram-positive. Gram-negative bacteria have two cell membranes that surround a thin layer of murin, which is a membrane or a cell wall. And then the gram-positive bacteria have a thick murin cell wall. The difference between the thin and the thick murin is that the thick murin is more structurally supportive. Spores are another way that the bacterial structure allows the bacteria to survive for years in a hostile environment. As a spore, the bacteria essentially goes on hibernate mode, and it doesn't require nutrients. Instead, it shrivels up and it just waits for the environment to become really welcoming. Viruses, on the other hand, are not like cells because they don't have cell membranes. The membrane that they have is considered an envelope, and either viruses have an envelope and are considered enveloped, like on the right, or they do not have an envelope and they're considered naked, like on the left. The viruses with an envelope have an envelope made of protein and lipid. Inside the protein and lipid structure is this capsid. The capsid is made up of proteins, and those proteins actually contain a genome in it. This is a really key point. You need to know that all viruses have genomes made of either DNA or RNA. One question on the quiz is going to ask you what their genome is. You need to know that viruses have both or either DNA or RNA, which they can use to encode proteins that can cause illness in the host. Now that we've learned about bacteria and viruses, it's important that we know how our body protects us. And one major mode is the epithelium, or which is a class of cells that form a two-sided membrane that can separate the inside of the body from the outside of the body. The skin is composed of multiple layers of epithelium, which stops microbes from entering our bodies. The intestines have a thin layer of epithelium, which prevents microbes from coming in. But remember, it's thin because it needs to permit nutrients to still come through. And finally, it's important to know what is technically inside the body and technically outside the body. We consider things that are outside, things that touch or have some kind of route to the outer environment. So what's the intestines is actually, the contents of the intestines is actually outside the body, because if you think about it, you have an internal compartment that leads to either the oral opening, which takes you to the environment, or the anal opening, which again takes you to the outer environment. Now, another really important way to know how our body protects us is this immune response. In order to, let's say, our defenses have been, our barriers have been breached, and now bacteria are flooding and viruses are flooding our body. Now, the first line of defense is this complement, which is a group of molecules in the blood that punches holes in the intestine or in the membrane of invading bacteria. That's really important. Make a mental note. It is the complement that punch holes in the membrane of invading bacteria. Now, let's say that certain bacteria have evolved a special adaptation to where the complement either doesn't work or they have ways to actively fight against the complement. In which case we call in macrophages. Macrophage, remember the word phage, or the root word phage means to eat. And macro, you can think of, macro means big. These are big cells that eat microbes. And eating microbes is kind of just represented here. You can just think it envelops the microbe into its body. And finally, we have the third line of defense, which is a little slower. We have B cells, T cells. Now, the B cells use antibodies that can bind to the complement here and destroy invading cells. Or they could even bind to the invading bacteria, simply cause them to clump together or flag them for destruction by macrophages. T cells attack invaders that are present within the body, and they identify infected or inside the cells, and T cells identify infected cells and destroy them. So these are the cells that maybe have viruses within them that are using their host machinery. So, if a question asks you, if a microbe enters the body, which cells of the immune system fight that microbe? You can see that all of these invading, or all of these lines of defense, so the B cells, T cells, and macrophages, all help defend against that microbe. Just important note, this is the content that'll help us. Tomorrow we'll be talking about more ways to answer the open response portion, but this is what you need to know for the quiz multiple choice portion. If you have any questions, come to my office hours, which you can find on my main page. Okay, bye y'all.